Welcome to Raven Talk, the official podcast of the Raven Tribe. The Raven Tribe is a home for warriors on the path, and is dedicated to training warriors for the battlefield of life. Visit us on the web at theraventribe.com, where you can learn more information on membership, warrior training, as well as links to our official YouTube channel, Facebook group, apparel store, and our official bookstore, Marshall Books.
Welcome back, Tribe. Today we're here with special guest, Dr. Brandt Smith, and we're going to be looking at a very serious topic today, deviating a little bit from our usual conversation about martial arts and warriorship, and we're going to be looking at post-traumatic stress disorder. Dr. Brandt, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, sir. I'm doing very well, and thank you for having me on again.
Well, great to have you here, and I'm glad we were able to get you on for such an important talk. Dr. Brandt, let's jump right in here. When you reached out to me, you told me this was a subject that you felt very strongly about, and you felt that people out there could benefit from this conversation. Tell me, from your experience being an academic in the psychology field, what is post-traumatic stress disorder? Let's kind of define it first. How does how do the diagnostic manuals define this disorder?
Well, it used to be considered strictly an anxiety disorder. It's being kind of divorced from that idea right now. It's not strictly anxiety. I can talk about some of my own research as we move along with that, how it actually differs. But what it is somebody has experienced some traumatic event, or in many cases a string of traumatic events, and that floods the brain with stress chemicals. And then people, because it has physical effects. I don't want people to think that this is something just in somebody's mind. There is no difference between brain and mind. There are physical effects. The shape of the brain actually changes. And people continue to relive the event. They continue to experience, at least in their mind, they continue to experience whatever was traumatic, whatever happened to them. Because it's not just GIs. It's also survivors of sexual assault. It's children that have grown up in abusive homes. It's people that survive Katrina, survive earthquakes, get burned in a house fire. This affects so many people. We figure that around 70% of people actually experience a serious trauma in their life, and around 12% of them actually develop long-term problems, which we say, well, that's not a lot of people, but that's several million people. That's a lot.
And Dr. Brandt, now you made a good statement there that this is not just something in the mind. There are very real physical effects. And talking a little bit briefly off air, you mentioned that there's actual changes to the actual physical makeup of the brain. Can you explain to us what goes on in people suffering from PTSD?
What we know, what's available in the literature from the several scientists that are studying this from several different areas, we know that when the brain is flooded with all those stress hormones, it causes a change in how the brain is shaped. And you can't see me, but I'm putting air quotes on shaped. You lose cortical mass. And that's the size of certain areas of the brain. In the frontal lobe, which that's responsible mostly for executive control, your executive function, your higher reasoning functions, and emotional control. But you also lose cortical mass in the corpus callosum. That's this thick, fibrous thing that connects both hemispheres of the brain. But you gain cortical mass in the old limbic system, which that's the oldest part of our brain, evolutionarily speaking, to where that is more responsible for fear, anger, those old, intense, ancient emotions. And that gains mass while we're losing mass in the part of the brain that is used to control it. And this happens in acute cases of post-traumatic stress disorder. The people that do the neuroimaging studies have published several peer-reviewed papers on this. I consider it, and I'm very conservative when I use the word fact. This happens. But, when that happens, I mean, like, oh, great, what does that mean? Well, it changes the way people behave. It changes how they relate to information and stimuli in their environment. It's a paper that I am currently working on with a couple of my colleagues, Luke Inge and Michael Zarate, that we have found that everybody has a negativity bias. We're more likely to cue on something negative in our environment than something positive. That's a given. Everybody has that. But that negativity bias gets enhanced as a function of how severe somebody's PTSD symptoms are. And, that's really sad then, because people are focusing so much of their attention on what's bad in the world instead of what's good in the world, and that's kind of sad, just in the grand scheme of things. The reason it fits with what we do, and I thought this would be a good culmination in the series of interviews that you and I were doing, and you know quite a bit about this too, Vargas. I mean, you're a social worker. I mean, you see this every day. It's pervasive. But the reason it applies to us as martial artists, because let's make no mistake about the kind of martial arts that we train. It's not patty cake. It's not patty cake. And if we were to apply our skills, people could die. We talk about knife fighting, and you think about the experience of actually killing somebody. Guts being dumped over your hands, blood all over the place, splattering in your eyes. If you don't have some residual response to that, there's something really wrong with you. And post-traumatic stress disorder, and I can't stress this enough, so many people are afraid to step up and get help because they think it signifies that they're weak or that there's something wrong with them. Having a response like this to completely crazy and abnormal circumstances is normal, and it's the right thing to do. I mean, this is when abnormal is completely normal. You're supposed to respond like that because we're just not raised. We're not made to just, have guts spilling over our hands and do these things. It's a terrible thing. When people have to go through this, when they have to experience these things and they feel bad about it, well, they should feel bad. But they shouldn't feel bad about feeling bad. They shouldn't feel bad about having these long-term effects. And as martial artists, this is another thing we probably leave out of our training, is we don't really think about the aftermath of the conflict. What does this mean? How is this going to change our lives as people? And what's this going to do to us?
So, Dr. Brandt, for the martial artist, for the person that uses physical violence to protect themselves, maybe protect a loved one, what's crucial in that, 24, 48, 72 hours after the initial event? Are you, recommending some type of crisis counseling, debriefing, with the individual? Are there steps and measures that one can take to, properly decompress from that kind of traumatic experience?
Okay, my recommendation is as a person and as a martial arts instructor. I'm not a clinical psychologist. So anything I say, should not be taken as information from a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist. Just somebody that does empirical research on the subject, and as a person that really cares about how we live our lives. Get help as soon as possible to try to put these things into perspective, how to deal with what just happened to you. It's like we often talk about, if a woman is raped, first get safe, then get help. And that includes more than just the physical. That's actually getting to the point where, people that are knowledgeable and trained, they know how to do these things, that they can help. They can try to help a person not get over it, because that's not appropriate, but to to live with the new circumstances. This thing happened. We can't erase the past, but we can take control of how we are going to live with it. And so get help immediately is what I would say. Don't hide from it. And unfortunately, the United States military has been changing their opinion, over the successive generations. It used to be if you had problems with what you did in the military, you were considered weak. There was something wrong with you. You weren't a real man. And so these people didn't get help. It also used to be the fact that if you went to behavioral health services or any psychiatric services, you could lose your security clearance, which means you lose your cool job and you end up doing a job that you didn't want to do, like being a cook or something, and then you would be stigmatized. And lots of research shows that people that need help actually don't get help because they're afraid of the stigma. They're afraid of the stigma. And that is unfortunate. And I would really like to see that change, but I don't have a magic wand powerful enough to just make that change overnight. That's a change that needs to happen in society, and it is happening. But I think we as martial arts instructors, we can at least talk to our students and, let them know what this is really about. What is the aftermath? I've seen your stuff, August, and I've seen what you can teach. You've seen what I can teach. There's a lot of people in your Raven tribe. I've seen their material. Wow. And, well, you've had me in for a seminar, and I always end it with that after-action report. We sit down and we talk. Like, what is it that we learned? What are our questions here? Where should we be going next? Maybe we should have an after-action, report, and just a sit down. When after we've gone through these things, what does this mean? These are the things that you need to be aware of. This is a perfectly normal reaction to such a traumatic event. Here's some steps you can take. Just to protect your own psyche. Because if you let that get a grip on you and you don't deal with it, it can have really damaging effects, not just on you personally, but your social life, your interactions with your family, with your wife, or your spouses, your children, at work. It can completely destroy the rest of your life. And it would be terrible to think that somebody was able to successfully defend themselves and preserve their life, and then have the aftermath of the event totally destroy that life.
And Dr. Brandt, I don't think that this is something that I think the audience should be aware that this is not something that only affects people in high-risk professions, soldiers, police officers, but, any individual out there. It's difficult to want to accept that you may need some help, that you may need some counseling. Again, it's a negative side of our culture where that's been very stigmatized, as you mentioned. And I just want to stress that I can't stress enough how important it is. Working in social services for the last 20 years, I've seen it. And trauma affects people in a lot of different ways. A lot of negative consequences of that trauma exist, and people that don't get help and don't pursue it sincerely will more than likely, just from my personal experience, will more than likely never get their life on the track that they want it to be on. It's a difficult thing. Yeah, it's very.
It becomes exceptionally difficult, but it's also exceptionally difficult for those first responders and second responders. As you mentioned, firefighters, police officers, but also people in your profession, to where you have to see these things happening in the long term. And I've known a number of social workers. My mother-in-law is a social worker. Well, she's retired now, but the things that you have to see and have to deal with on a daily basis, I'm sure you can attest, sometimes it's kind of hard to deal with. And we need to be aware of these second-order effects. It's a very general, hypothetical story I give is a U.S. Navy SEAL finally comes home, leaves the Navy, starts in a new career in the civilian world, but he's having problems. How is that 8-year-old daughter going to respond to dad freaking out and things go bad, and we follow this downward spiral of what happens, because you mentioned not being able to get your life in order. PTSD is a beast, and let's say that it gets bad, it gets bad, it gets bad, it gets worse, and then in a fit one night, somebody hits their spouse. Yeah, then the police are called. Now there's a criminal record. We know there's a large comorbidity. That's when other issues are related to it, alcoholism, substance abuse. So now the guy's drinking hard and eventually ends up with a DUI. Now he loses his license, can't get to work, starts causing more problems on the family because the income's not there, and he's got this criminal record. Hits his spouse, things get worse. And eventually we hear, and luckily this is rare, where we have a veteran that's holding off the police with an assault rifle. But by then, the police are going to do what they have to do. They have to defend themselves, and they have to defend the spouse and the children. They could kill him. And it was all avoidable. It was all avoidable. But even if it doesn't go to something that dramatic, I've spoken with some rape survivors to where now they have problems forming good relationships with men. That part of their life has been destroyed. And these are otherwise, decent people. They're good people, but this thing happened. It never got properly addressed. And, it's such a dramatic issue that people in warrior craft really need to pay attention to it. They need to be aware of what happens in the aftermath of conflict. And we've ignored it too long. Just as a society, we've ignored it too long.
We have, and the attention that it does get, in my opinion, is often far too negative. I want to throw one thing out there just to get your thoughts on it, but, people will show the greatest lack of understanding when it comes to mental illness. I think that anybody can understand seeing somebody in a wheelchair, seeing somebody on crutches, seeing somebody on an oxygen tank. Whenever there's any kind of physical, tell or physical symptom that's external that people can look at, you would be the worst person in the world if you made fun of the guy in the wheelchair. If you made breathing noises to make fun of the guy on the oxygen tank, you would be like not even your friends would want to be around you. But everybody makes jokes about
being my friend after that.
Yeah, and nobody has any, I shouldn't say nobody, but so many people have no problem throwing words around like crazy. Yeah. Oh, he's batshit crazy. Oh, he's crazy. Crazy's negative. Crazy.
And a recent survey says that about half our population thinks that every veteran has mental problems.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is that, when somebody's dealing with trauma and the effects of trauma and the symptoms that manifest in their lives, that illness is just as real. It has just as many physical effects on the person as an illness that may be visible externally. But people are very insensitive to it. People, minimize it, they downplay it, and we still have, verbiage like, oh, crazy, he's just crazy. And how can somebody, apart from just being a very strong individual, it's going to be a very hard-pressed to see people that are willing to step forward and say, hey, by the way, I think I might need some help because I might be crazy, quote unquote.
Right.
It's just very difficult. If we treat an illness, nobody's ashamed to go and get help for their asthma. Nobody's ashamed to inject insulin for their diabetes. But if
you lost a leg, no one's ashamed to go get a prosthetic and learn how to walk with.
Exactly. But if you Yeah, but if you take medication for a mental illness, oh, you're taking crazy pills.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you.
Yes. So it's something that our culture has to change, and we need to be aware of it. People need to really understand, what it is, and understand that it's very real. Physical effects are real. This is not just somebody, making this up as they go along. Mental illness is serious, and it affects so much more of the population than most people are even aware of.
It's critically, and we talk about percentage of population. Those numbers are misleading because when you look at a percentage of the population that's schizophrenic, percentage of the population that has PTSD, those numbers sound small. Then you take into account the population, and then you realize the millions of people that are suffering with this, and it's ridiculous. Research that I've recently conducted, and we are writing it for publication right now, and I'm the one that's slowing it down because I'm not being motivated enough, obviously. And truth is, I'm having trouble with the statistical analyses, but that's getting worked out. What we have found is that people that would not even qualify for a diagnosis because the symptoms are not severe enough, there's not enough of the symptoms present, are responding the same way that people that would qualify for a full diagnosis. And this is partially on the insurance companies. They're like, well, we're not going to pay for it unless there's a diagnosis. And then you go to the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that determines whether or not you have PTSD. You have to have a certain number of symptoms from one column, symptoms from another column, and a certain number of symptoms from another column. It's kind of like a Chinese restaurant menu. And if you don't, well, you don't got PTSD, so the insurance companies don't step in and actually pay for things. And I'm not faulting the DSM or the American Psychological Association or anybody like that. We have to have some criteria. But we should start looking at this, and a lot of researchers are already on board. I mean, I think it's the majority, that PTSD should be looked at as a continuum. Now, where that continuum is to where it becomes a persistent and really damaging problem, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that question. But there are a lot of really, really smart men and women that are working on trying to figure it out. Because it's not a safe, comfortable question that we can just talk about in our labs. This has immediate impact on everyone. Every single man and woman on the planet. Period. It has that impact on everybody. And it's important for us as martial arts instructors because all your listeners are either practitioners or they're instructors themselves. All of you are community leaders. There's at least a portion of the population that looks to you for some type of guidance. It's not enough for me to do research in my lab and do some cool mathemagic statistics and publish some articles and talk to my colleagues in science. It's really up to the real stakeholders of science, the people. That's you, that's everybody. I mean, we're all the stakeholders of science. We all have a stake in what's going on there. And so it's really, really important that community leaders like yourself as a social worker, but you as a martial arts instructor, and most of your listeners, and just as a human being, not even as a community leader, we need to hold our elected officials, responsible for this, hold their feet to the fire. Sometimes all we got to do is educate them because they need the information too to make the good decisions when they go up the hill. That's up to us. And we need to think about, the first responders, police officers, firefighters, paramedics. We need to think about our GIs. We also need to think about, sexual assault survivors. I won't call them victims. They're survivors. It's wrong to call them victims. I also want to talk about people that survive like horrible natural disasters. People that survive those earthquakes in Brandt. It's important that we go beyond the obvious physical problems and start to look at mental health as a physical problem. Because in martial arts, we always like to talk about, that connection between mind, body, and spirit. They're the same thing. There's no connection that you need to work on. It's already there. Your
Absolutely.
brain, your mind, your heart, all of that it's connected.
And I think that our community especially, and you may be hard-pressed to find people that are going to admit to this, but I would wager, a good portion of people in the martial arts community are there in one way or another because of some type of trauma. A lot of times I've seen people that want to take martial arts to feel more empowered, to feel stronger. I can't tell you how many stories.
I'll admit it. I started because I was tired of being a skinny white kid getting my ass kicked all the time.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of trauma there. I've heard tons of stories of people, why'd you start martial arts? I was being bullied. I was ready to lose my mind. I was getting bullied so much. On a sadder scale, I've seen people say, my dad used to be the one that bullied me. That bullied me. My dad was the one putting those beatings on me, and I didn't want to feel weak anymore. I didn't want to feel that I couldn't defend myself. Women, and men too, but my experience has been more with women who come from abusive relationships and are getting to a point in their lives where they're feeling more empowered. They've broken away from that, and they don't want to ever be in that position again, and they come to martial arts. So the martial arts is an area of our culture where people do come from a history of trauma. It's just a reality. And
absolutely. And I don't have any data on this, and I so want to do the study. I so want to do this to where martial arts training returns a sense of personal empowerment. It might be a very big healing event, for people to learn that they actually have control over their mind and body again, after whatever had happened to them. This could become a healing event. And I want all of our brothers and sisters out there that are teaching and training, think about the benefit that we can give to people out in our community that are really hurting. Think about that sense of empowerment, that sense of self-ownership that they can get by learning that they do not have to be a victim to people that they thought were powerful. We know that domestic abusers, they're a bunch of cowards. And hell, most criminals are a bunch of cowards because they don't go after the person that is primed and ready and capable. They go after somebody who's weak, somebody they can bully, somebody they can beat down, somebody they can extort. They're a bunch of cowards. They're villains in the oldest sense of the word. But this martial arts training can actually be a really important healing event for people that have been through these kinds of trauma. And we should really think about it. And I have no evidence whatsoever, no empirical studies. I would love to do the study. I would love to do this study. I don't have the money. I don't have the resources to be able to do it, but I would love to do that. Just to see how much, because my hypothesis would be that it would return a sense of personal worth and empowerment. And we could actually be healers. And isn't that ultimately what we're supposed to be doing as warriors?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We're not supposed to be killers. We're supposed to be healers.
Protectors. Yeah, absolutely.
And protector is not just keeping it from happening. It's also healing the wounds when it happens. And then that's the real reason when you talked to me about doing another interview, and I said I wanted to talk about this, and this is the reason why. I think the service that you and many of our our comrades can offer to the community is, we can help you heal. But I want to study the process. I want to see what is actually happening there. I want to know. As a scientist, I always want to know things. I want to pick at it. But I want to see it. And I want to see the value beyond, physical fitness and everything like that is out there. I'm like, yeah, we all know that, blah, blah, blah. And don't ever take martial arts to get in shape. That's stupid. Go join a gym. There's fewer bruises. But we can give people that sense of personal strength, and that they will know that they actually own themselves. And I think that is what we need to know about PTSD in the aftermath of conflict, is that first, yes, this happens. We need to prepare our students for it. We need to prepare ourselves for it. That, this could happen. This could be very bad for us. And God, I hope it never happens to any of our students or any of our listeners, that you actually have to use your skills. I hope you never do. I hope it's just something fun that we brag about and pick on each other about. I hope it stays that way. And I hope it's just fun a couple nights a week. We work up a good sweat, move on about our business. That's what I hope. If you have to use it, brothers and sisters, don't feel weak because you feel bad. And I'm going to use some harsh language. Feeling fucked up about a fucked up situation is completely normal. You're supposed to.
Yeah, and
go ahead, feel bad, and get help.
Yeah, and I would go as far as to say, Dr. Smith, that if you don't feel bad, then there's a whole nother set of problems going on with you.
Yeah, I think if you could gut another human being with your bare hands and feel absolutely nothing, I don't really want to be around you. Period. There's something wrong with you.
Yeah. I mean, these are things that are developed into our physical makeup. We are going to react to these extreme events. We're not designed to, be involved with something at that level and not have a reaction. The reaction is supposed to be there.
We are evolved to be hunters. We are. That's why we have the binocular vision. That's why we were able to line up our joints for a flattened arc to be able to throw a spear. And we are evolved with an endocrine system that allows us to go into heightened periods of activity. But we're social primates. We are more evolved to be getting along with each other. We don't do well alone. Nobody survives alone. These periods of particularly the long-term traumas, abuse of homes, combat, things like that, that's not normal for us. I mean, really, that's not normal for us. If you read the old books, they even had seasons when you were allowed to have wars. And then you didn't do it at other times because, well, you got to get the crops in. So war was a seasonal thing. And even then, it was probably traumatic. We're social primates. We're not murderers by nature. No. Not at all. We're not killers by nature. But sometimes we have to kill. That's unfortunate. I keep hoping that Gene Roddenberry's right and we'll outgrow this one day.
I hope so, too.
Yeah, maybe. I keep hoping. I don't think I'm going to be alive to see that happen, but I keep hoping. But in the meantime, we can teach our people how to deal with the immediate event and save their own lives, and then we really need to start, it should be a component of martial arts training. How do you deal with the aftermath of utter mayhem and bedlam? How do you maintain your sense of self? And for those people out there that have gone through horrible abuse as children, or is being attacked and constantly and consistently bullied. And I feel so bad when I hear these stories about some kid that committed suicide because they were being Facebook bullied. Come to us. Come to the Raven Tribe. Find yourself a good instructor. At least there, you can be treated as an individual of worth, and you can start learning that you're important. This is what we need as martial arts, and I didn't want to make it a science discussion. I wanted it to be something as another one of our warrior discussions. This is something that we all need to be aware of, and we need to get out in front of the discussion. And we as leaders, you got titles of Guru, Sensei, Sifu, Grand Poobah of the Universe, Supreme Grand Master, I don't care. Get out in front of your people, your students, your colleagues, and say, we should have a serious discussion about this. What do we do? And then, what can we do to be a healing force in the world? Be not a cancer on the earth. Try to be a positive force in the world. Musashi talked about that. I keep bringing Musashi up. Try to be a positive force in the world. This is a way that we can, as community leaders, as individuals that care, and make it an issue. Make it an issue in our courses. Make it an issue in our discussions. And make it an issue when we go and actually vote for people at state, local, municipal. Make this a number one issue. We take care of people. And if we seriously took care of these things, we would have the number one anti-crime program in the world. You go through the dossier of any hardcore criminal, you will find a lifetime of traumatic events that led them there. When I first heard of Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm a clear candidate for the death penalty as far as I'm concerned. And then I hear about what he experienced and lived through in his life, and I was like, wow, the kid doesn't stand a chance.
No, you're absolutely right. It's something, and like you said, especially with long-term trauma, it's heartbreaking. The effects that it can have on people, and in extreme cases, even people like Jeffrey Dahmer. It definitely has an effect. And as you mentioned at the top of the hour, that brain changes. That there's actual physical changes going on in the body, and a lot of this. Negative behavior, negative symptoms, all stems from that.
Well, I hope when you post this, it will start a discussion. I'd like to see it going. I'd like to see you talk about it a lot more too. I would like to leave everybody with a shock to the system, something to ponder. For every man, woman, or child that we lose to trauma, untreated trauma, there's a chance that we're losing the next Albert Einstein or Jonas Salk. He cured polio. We're losing these brilliant men and women. It's like the one that cures cancer might never do it because he lived his life being raped as a child. And now we lose him. Martial arts instructors can step in and return a sense of empowerment. I don't think that's enough, but it's something that we can do. And we can continue to stand strong on our morals and start demanding that our elected leaders do the same. And we can ensure that we are actually talking to our students and our comrades about these very, very serious issues, because it is part of warriorship. And we always talk about preparing, get in shape, and we talk about technique, and we talk about, and we're going to work this particular technique 1,000 times, and blah, blah, blah. We don't talk enough about the aftermath, which that includes PTSD.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Dr. Brandt, I want to also take a moment to just reach out to the listening audience. If you are not the person suffering from the trauma, suffering from the effects of trauma, be aware that somebody next to you may be. And, this is a tribe, and it's a group of people that are in theory, we're bound together by a common thread, and mutual support, brotherhood is part of that. I ask that everybody be conscious of how you approach mental illness in general, how you speak about the subject, the way that you demonstrate your tolerance and understanding. And I ask that everybody really try to be compassionate and find that ability to support another human being going through something so difficult. I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, it's brotherhood. We're not the Raven Tribe Karate Association. That's not our bag. We're a brotherhood here, and we need to support each other. And there's a lot of members of the tribe that I know for a fact have been through very traumatic experiences. And that sense of brotherhood, that sense of support is definitely something that we all need at some point in time in our lives or another. And we should be ready and willing and able to do that for each other. So, again, if you're not the person that's suffering the trauma, you need to be aware that people are suffering. People do, have battles that you can't always see. If you are the person that is suffering from the trauma, I want to tell you that you deserve to have a rich and full, productive life. And you should make every effort to get out there, get the help that you need, get professional help. There is no shame in what you're going through. There's no, real stigma. Anybody that would stigmatize you because of you seeking treatment is not the kind of person you would want to have in your life. It's not the kind of person whose opinion should matter to you. You need to get out there and chase that life for yourself and for the other people in your life. A wise man once told me, your life is not your own. You need to get help for your wife, for your children, for your brothers and sisters, your moms and dads, for your friends. Hell, just for your brothers and sisters in the tribe. And especially for yourself. You have a right to a good, productive life. And if you have obstacles and roadblocks that are preventing you from that, you need to do everything in your power to make sure that you can overcome those hurdles.
Wow, Dave, that's beautiful, and I'd like to, I'm going to say, I support everything that Vargas just said. I mean, Mr. Vargas is absolutely right, and as a social worker, he's seen the deleterious effects himself. The only thing I would add to it is we're losing about 22 veterans a day to committing suicide. Brothers, sisters, don't do it. I know it hurts. Call me. Call Vargas. Call somebody. Just don't do it. Don't do it. You're too valuable. As an individual, you're too valuable in the world. Don't do it. Reach out. Come to me. Come to Vargas. Come to any of us. Whatever you need. We'll be there. I don't need sleep. I'm not going to get better looking. Reach out to us. Just don't do it. Please.
Well, Dr. Smith, with that said, I want to thank you for being on the show with us to talk about this very, very important topic. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. And again, to the audience at home, if you need help, please feel free, contact us. We will put you at least in touch with somebody that can get you started in the right direction to get the help that you need. And we're pulling for all of you out there that are dealing with your own battles, and we hope to be here for you. Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much for having me again.